When a championship dream turned into an NBA nightmare, what if I told you that one of the biggest stories of this NBA Finals had nothing to do with a game-winning shot, a clutch defensive stop, or a superstar dropping 50 points? What if the real story happened outside the arena in the streets of New York? Because over the last few days, something unfolded that shocked even longtime NBA insiders. A story so disturbing that many people watching from home couldn't believe what they were seeing. And if even half of these allegations are true, this wasn't just another example of passionate fandom getting out of hand. This was something much darker. The New York Knicks were standing on the edge of history. For the first time in over 50 years, a championship finally felt within reach. Generations of Knicks fans had waited for this moment. Fathers had passed their heartbreak down to sons. Fans had endured losing seasons, failed rebuilds, front office disasters, and decades of disappointment. Then suddenly, hope arrived. Madison Square Garden was alive again. The city could almost taste its first NBA title since 1973. But championship pressure has a strange way of revealing people's true character. And after the Spurs stole a crucial victory in Game 3, that hope turned into frustration. That frustration turned into anger. And according to reports and videos circulating online, that anger spilled far beyond the basketball court. Spurs fans allegedly found themselves being confronted simply for wearing their team's colors. Videos surfaced showing heated encounters on Manhattan streets. Reports emerged describing chaos surrounding members connected to the Spurs organization. And at the center of it all stood one player, 20-year-old Victor Wembanyama, the NBA's brightest young superstar, a generational talent carrying the weight of San Antonio's championship dreams on his shoulders. He came to New York expecting hostile crowds. Every visiting superstar does. But nobody expects fear to follow them beyond the arena doors. Nobody expects their hotel stay to become part of the story. Nobody expects a basketball rivalry to transform into headlines questioning where fandom ends and something far more dangerous begins. Tonight, we're breaking down exactly what happened, why the entire basketball world is talking about it, and what this controversy could mean for the future of NBA fan culture. Before we dive deeper, tell us where you're watching from right now. If you believe passion should never cross the line into chaos, hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and comment the number 1 below. Because this story is only getting started. Chapter 2. The city that had waited 50 years. To understand how this situation escalated, you first have to understand one thing about New York. This city doesn't experience sports the same way most places do. For millions of Knicks fans, basketball isn't simply entertainment, it's identity. The New York Knicks aren't just another franchise. They're woven into the fabric of the city itself. Madison Square Garden isn't merely an arena, it's a stage where generations of hope, frustration, pride, and heartbreak have played out in front of the entire world. And for more than 5 decades, that story had been defined by one painful truth: failure. Year after year, season after season, Knicks fans kept showing up despite disappointment becoming almost routine. Draft mistakes, coaching changes, superstar dreams that never materialized, playoff collapses, endless jokes from rival fan bases. Still, they stayed loyal. That loyalty became part of New York's identity. The city developed a chip on its shoulder. We're overdue. We've suffered enough. This is finally our time. Then came this finals run. For younger fans, this wasn't just a championship opportunity. It was their first real chance to witness history. Every victory amplified the belief. Every loss amplified the fear. Because after waiting 53 years, nobody wanted to imagine watching the dream slip away yet again. Then Game 3 happened. The Spurs walked into Madison Square Garden and ruined the script. Victor Wembanyama dominated stretches of the game with a calmness that almost felt cruel to the home crowd. While thousands expected celebration, they instead watched uncertainty creep back into their championship dreams. The energy shifted immediately. Inside the Garden, frustration echoed through the building. Outside the Garden, according to numerous accounts, emotions became increasingly volatile. What should have remained disappointment over a basketball game allegedly transformed into hostility directed toward people who simply represented the opposing side. Fans wearing Spurs jerseys reportedly became targets for insults and confrontation. Visitors who had traveled hundreds of miles to support their team suddenly found themselves navigating an atmosphere that felt far different from ordinary playoff trash talk. For many, this wasn't the New York they expected. And that's what makes this story so uncomfortable. Because the overwhelming majority of Knicks fans are passionate, loyal supporters who would never condone crossing those lines. But sometimes, All it takes is a small group fueled by emotion to change the narrative surrounding an entire fan base. The deeper question is this: after decades of pain and decades of waiting, had championship desperation pushed a handful of people beyond the boundaries of common sense? Or had warning signs always been there, simply waiting for the perfect storm? Because what allegedly happened next would take this controversy to an entirely different level. The streets were only the beginning. The team bus was next. The bus that became a warning sign. The moment the Spurs team bus was reportedly identified, the entire situation changed. Because this was no longer about fans yelling after a painful loss. This was no longer about frustration spilling out of Madison Square Garden. This was movement. This was pursuit. According to the story spreading across basketball circles, a group of Knicks fans allegedly located the Spurs team bus and began closing in around it. For the players and staff inside, the scene must have felt completely different from anything they had experienced inside an arena. In basketball, hostility has rules. The crowd can boo you, they can chant your name, they can try to shake your confidence from the stand. But there are barriers: security, distance, structure. A bus surrounded on a city street is something else. There is no hardwood between you and the noise. No referee, no timeout, no scoreboard, just glass, metal, and the uncomfortable realization that the anger outside is now close enough to touch. For professional athletes, fear is not something they usually admit. They're trained to stay composed. They're told to ignore pressure. They're expected to walk into hostile buildings and perform like nothing can bother them. But this wasn't ordinary pressure. This was personal. And that is where the controversy became bigger than the Knicks, bigger than the Spurs, and bigger than one final series. If opposing players can be followed outside the arena, if team transportation can be surrounded, if a visiting organization has to question whether basic travel through a major American city is safe, then the NBA has a problem it can no longer treat as background noise. The league sells intensity. It markets rivalries. It celebrates hostile environments because they create unforgettable television. But there is a line, and once fans believe they can take the emotions of the arena into the street, that line becomes dangerously thin. What made this moment even more alarming was the idea that the bus may not have been found by accident. If fans were sharing information online, tracking movements, or encouraging others to gather around specific locations, then this wasn't just spontaneous chaos. It was the modern fan culture machine turning outrage into action. And the scariest part, the bus incident was not the final escalation, because while the Spurs organization could adjust transportation, increase security, and change routes, there was one place where Victor Wembanyama was supposed to feel completely protected: his hotel. And according to the claims surrounding this story, even that boundary was crossed. The hotel line. A hotel should be the one safe place a visiting player can breathe. After the boos, the lights, and the pressure of the finals, that room should be private. But according to the claims around the story, even that boundary was crossed. Victor Wembanyama was not just another player in New York. He was the Spurs' centerpiece, the nightmare matchup, and the young star capable of crushing the Knicks' championship dream. That made him a target. Some fans allegedly tried to find where he was staying, waited near the hotel, and watched his movements. And that is where this stopped feeling like normal playoff energy. Inside the arena, fans can boo, they can chant, they can try to rattle a superstar, but outside the arena, it becomes different. No player should wonder whether leaving a hotel could turn into a confrontation. No 20-year-old should have to prepare for the biggest games of his life while strangers are trying to track his every move. That is not passion. That is obsession wearing a jersey. And if the NBA wants to protect its future stars, it cannot treat this as ordinary fan behavior. Because when the league's brightest young name becomes the center of a security concern in America's biggest media city, one question becomes impossible to ignore. Who was supposed to stop this before it got this far? The silence around the chaos. The most troubling part of the story may not be the anger itself. It may be the silence around it, because when emotions explode after a finals game, security is supposed to step in before things become dangerous. Police are supposed to protect people, not judge which jersey deserves protection. Arena staff, city officials, and league representatives are supposed to understand when trash talk becomes intimidation. But according to the allegations surrounding this controversy, too much was allowed to continue for too long. Spurs fans reportedly felt exposed. The team reportedly had to rethink its movement around the city, and Wembanyama's situation became a symbol of a much larger failure. This is where the NBA faces a difficult question. The league loves the energy of New York. It loves the ratings. It loves the drama of Madison Square Garden. A Knicks championship run is a business dream for the NBA, but business cannot come before player safety. It cannot come before fan safety, and it cannot come before basic responsibility. Because if the league stays too quiet, it risks sending a dangerous message. That chaos can be tolerated when the market is big enough, and the storyline is valuable enough. That would be a mistake. The NBA does not need to attack Knicks fans as a whole. Most of them did nothing wrong. But the league does need to make one thing clear. A jersey is not permission to harass people. A rivalry is not permission to follow players. And a championship dream is not permission to make anyone feel unsafe. Because once that line is blurred, every future playoff series becomes more dangerous. And what happened in New York could become the warning sign everyone remembers too late. When social media poured gas in the fire, this story did not spread slowly. It exploded. And that is the new reality of NBA drama in 2026. One clip, one post, one rumor, one angry fan thread can turn a tense situation into a national controversy before the league even has time to respond. If fans were truly sharing locations, tracking movement, or encouraging others to confront Spurs supporters, then social media was not just covering the chaos, it was helping fuel it. That is what makes this era so dangerous. Old school fan anger used to fade outside the arena. Now it gets amplified, reposted, clipped, and turned into a challenge for strangers who want attention. People stop thinking like fans. They start performing for the internet. And when that happens, common sense disappears. A person in a Spurs jersey becomes content. A team bus becomes content. A superstar's hotel becomes content. That is a terrifying shift. Because sports are supposed to create community, not turn real people into targets for online outrage. The NBA cannot control every post, every fan, or every street corner. But it can demand stronger security, clearer boundaries, and faster consequences when online behavior threatens real-world safety. This is no longer just about New York. This is about the future of every high-pressure playoff city. Because if one viral mob is allowed to become part of the show, the next one may be even worse. And the league has to decide right now whether it wants to protect the game or simply profit from the chaos around it. The reputation damage, nobody can ignore. The worst part for New York is that this controversy does not only affect the people directly involved, it affects the image of the entire city. For years, Madison Square Garden has been marketed as basketball's greatest stage. Players dream of starring there, fans dream of witnessing history there. Broadcasters call it special because when the building is loud, it feels like the whole NBA is watching. But this story changes the conversation. Now, instead of only talking about the Knicks championship chase, people are asking whether visiting players can feel safe in New York during a high-stakes series. That is a serious problem because reputation matters. Free agents notice. Players notice. Teams notice. Families notice. Nobody wants to bring their child, spouse, or close friend into an environment where wearing the wrong jersey could make them a target. And even if most Knicks fans did nothing wrong, the loudest and worst behavior often becomes the image people remember. That is why leadership matters. The Knicks organization, the NBA, city officials, and law enforcement cannot simply hope the story disappears after the finals. They need to show that boundaries still exist. They need to show that passion can be celebrated without allowing intimidation to become norm. Because New York does not need to be soft to be safe. Madison Square Garden can still be loud. Knicks fans can still be ruthless inside the rule. The city can still bring pressure unlike anywhere else in basketball. But once the game ends, humanity has to matter more than rivalry. If New York wants to be remembered as the city that finally completed a historic championship run, it cannot also become the city where fan culture crossed the line and nobody stepped in fast enough. That is the battle now. Not Knicks versus Spurs, not Wembanyama versus the Garden, but passion versus responsibility. And the outcome of that battle may define how this finals is remembered long after the final buzzer sound. The question the NBA cannot avoid: at some point, the NBA has to stop pretending fan behavior is just background noise. Because this story is not only about one angry crowd, one heated night, or one city losing control of its emotions during the final. This is about what happens when the league's biggest moments become so emotional, so commercial, and so viral that the boundaries around the game begin to disappear. The NBA loves intensity. It loves sold-out arenas shaking on national television. It loves rivalries that feel personal. It loves when fans stand for 4 quarters, scream until they lose their voices, and turn every possession into a pressure cooker. That kind of environment is part of what makes playoff basketball special. But intensity without limits becomes something else. And once players, coaches, staff members, families, or visiting fans begin to feel unsafe outside the court, the league no longer has a normal fan problem. It has a security problem. That is why the response to this situation matters so much. Not quietly, not behind closed doors, not through some carefully worded statement that says a lot without actually saying anything. The NBA has to be direct. The court is where competition belongs. The arena is where booze belong. The game is where emotions belong. But hotels, buses, sidewalks, restaurants, family entrances, and private spaces are not part of the battlefield. If a fan buys a ticket, that gives them the right to cheer, boo, celebrate, and suffer with their team. It does not give them ownership over another person's safety. It does not give them permission to track an athlete. It does not give them the right to turn a city street into an extension of the arena. And if the league fails to make that clear now, every future playoff city will be watching. Every other fan base will learn from what happened here. Some will learn the right lesson, others may learn the wrong one. They may think that if the moment is big enough, if the storyline is valuable enough, if the ratings are strong enough, then chaos becomes part of the show. That cannot be the future of basketball. The NBA has spent years building global stars. Victor Wembanyama is one of the brightest young names the league has ever seen. He represents the future of the sport, not just in San Antonio, but around the world. But global stars need global level protection, because if the NBA cannot protect its most valuable young players in one of its most important cities, then every team will start asking the same uncomfortable question before entering a hostile playoff environment. Are we traveling to play basketball? Or are we walking into a security risk? The moment that could change NBA fan culture. This controversy may eventually fade from the headlines, but it should not disappear from the league's memory. The finals will end, a trophy will be lifted, the cameras will move on, fans will start talking about trades, free agency, draft rumors, coaching changes, and the next superstar drama, but the people who lived through this situation will not forget it that quickly. Spurs fans who felt threatened in New York will remember. Players sitting inside that bus will remember. Victor Wembanyama will remember what it felt like to be treated not just as an opponent, but as a target. And the NBA should remember too, because ugly moments only become turning points if powerful people are willing to learn from them. This is a chance to reset the standard, not by weakening rivalry, not by making arenas quiet, not by telling fans to stop caring. Basketball without emotion would lose part of its soul, but emotion must still have boundaries. The game is emotional, but people are not props. Players are not public property. Visiting fans are not enemies. And cities hosting major sporting events have a responsibility to protect everyone, not just the loudest side. That is the real lesson here. Madison Square Garden can still be ruthless. Knicks fans can still make opponents uncomfortable inside the rules. The boos can stay. The chants can stay. The rivalry can stay. But hotels cannot become targets. Team buses cannot become trophies. Opposing jerseys cannot become invitations for confrontation. If the league gets this right, this ugly chapter could force meaningful change across every NBA city. If it gets this wrong, then what happened in New York may not be remembered as an isolated incident. It may be remembered as the warning everyone ignored. Where the line must be drawn. Extended version. Every NBA season leaves behind highlights, statistics, and champions. But only a few moments leave behind questions that the league cannot ignore. This situation in New York is one of them, because once the noise of the finals fades, what remains is not just a scoreboard or a series result. What remains is the impact of what happened when emotions moved beyond the court. This story was never only about the Knicks. It was never only about the Spurs. And it was never only about Victor Wembanyama, the 20-year-old star suddenly placed at the center of an environment that reportedly went far beyond normal playoff intensity. It became something bigger, a reflection of modern sports culture. The NBA today exists in a world where every moment is amplified. Every reaction is clipped, shared, replayed, and pushed into millions of timelines within seconds. That kind of attention turns excitement into pressure, and pressure into obsession. In that environment, the line between supporting your team and losing control becomes dangerously thin. And once that line disappears, consequences follow. Because players are no longer just performers on a court. They become public figures who can be tracked, discussed, and targeted in real time. Visiting teams are no longer just competitors. They become symbols of rivalry that can spill beyond the game itself. That is where the NBA now finds itself under scrutiny. Not because basketball is broken, but because the ecosystem around it has evolved faster than the boundaries meant to contain it. The league has always depended on emotion. That is its strength. The intensity of arenas like Madison Square Garden is what makes the NBA global. The energy, the pressure, the noise, these are part of its identity. But identity without limits becomes risk. And risk, when left unmanaged, becomes precedent. What makes this situation especially important is not just what allegedly happened, but what it represents. It forces a conversation about responsibility across multiple levels. Teams must think about how visiting players and fans are protected. The league must decide how quickly it responds when boundaries are crossed. And cities must ask whether their systems are prepared for modern fan behavior that can shift from online coordination to real-world action in minutes. Because the reality is simple. Basketball does not stop at the final buzzer in today's world, but safety must. No rivalry, no playoff series, no championship pursuit can justify behavior that puts people at risk outside the game environment. That principle has to remain absolute. Madison Square Garden can continue to be one of the loudest, most intense arenas in sports. Knicks fans can continue to bring unmatched passion. The league can continue to grow its global stars, its storylines, and its rivalries that define generations. But the line must be clear. Inside the arena, competition. Outside the arena, respect. Inside the game, pressure. Outside the game, protection. If the NBA enforces that boundary consistently, then stories like this can become turning points that improve the sport rather than damage it. If it does not, then future playoff narratives may not only be remembered for game-winning shots or championship moments. They may also be remembered for what happened when emotions spilled beyond control. And that is a future the league cannot afford to ignore. Before you leave this video, take a second and think about, where should the NBA draw the line between passion and behavior? Because how you answer that question says everything about the future of the game.